but this one is focused on social work and careers in case management for child development majors. But if you are from other majors, I'm sure it will also have some information to help you navigate the path of social work. We have an packed evening for us. We have Professor Nicole Whaley, who is going to share some information as the expert on career paths and career options in social work. And then I'm Dr. Dennis. I'm the department chair. I'm going to be providing just a little bit of information on some courses that you can take for, especially for child development majors, including certificates. And then we're going to have an alumni from Cal State LA who has pursued the career in in social work, and she's going to tell us more about her experiences and what it's like to actually work in that field. And so welcome if you're here tonight. We're going to be recording. We'll also share the slides with those of you who attend or who ask for the slides, as well as the recording. So I hope that you can stay and join us. There will be plenty of time for questions as well. Feel free to put your questions in the chat if you have them while we're going along, but there will certainly be some time for questions in between each of our segments. So welcome, and I'm going to hand it off to, I'm going to stop my share. And I'm going to hand it over to Nicole Whaley, who is going to present on careers.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Dennis. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Whaley. I'll be here to talk a little bit about social work and case management careers. I am an alum of Cal State LA for the MSW program, Masters of Social Work, some moons ago, and have been in the field and I've been in the social services field now for over the last 20 years. So any questions that you guys have, even as I'm going along, feel free. There's, we have a few of us in here now. So if you think of something, I can't see the chat, so just go ahead and raise your hand or speak out and I can answer your questions as we're going. And then if you have any questions towards the end, we could do that as well, okay? If anything's not making sense while I'm going through it, of course, stop me and just feel free to ask. We'll talk about some career options and paths and also courses and certificates that you can get within social work. Let me just move some things around here. All right, so within the social work profession, overall employment for social workers is projected to grow 12% from 2020 to 2030, faster than the average for all occupations. There were over 715,000 social worker jobs in the US as of 2020, as reported by the National Association of Social Workers. For the Council on Social Work Education is to promote human and community well-being, guided by a person and environment construct and global perspective, the respect for human diversity and knowledge backed on scientific inquiry. Also, social work's purpose is actualized through the quest for social and economic justice, the prevention of conditions that limit human rights, the elimination of poverty, and the enhancement of the quality of life for all persons. So the principles for the Council on Social Work Education is self-determination, confidentiality, individualization and acceptance, a non-judgmental attitude, and freedom of expression. And just so that we can get some interaction going, why do you guys think that would be important for a social worker in that profession to have those qualities and those principles?
I believe they're important because you'll be speaking with a lot of people, so you want to make them feel welcome, that you're not judging them, and so they can open up to you. Absolutely. Thank you, Jennifer. Any other thoughts on that? Why these would be principles that the Council on Social Work Education would highlight?
Yeah, I would like to share, I think since we're serving underrepresented individuals, it's important to bring them up and uplift them and strengthen their lives. So treating them with respect is very important.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you, Diana. Anyone else?
In the chat, we have Heather that said, you have to gain their trust. It's a vulnerable population.
Absolutely. Thank you, Heather. Exactly. And so when you're dealing with families, when you're dealing with people, when you're dealing with human lives, it is of great importance to make sure that you remember that we're all human, we all go through things. And in social work, unfortunately, we tend to meet people at the very worst part of their life. And so that is why you have to have self-determination. They have to be able to do what they feel is best for their lives. We are here just to be a guide, just to help. But at the end of the day, the client is the one that determines what they want to do. You must maintain confidentiality. You get a lot of information as a social worker. You learn a lot about people. You learn a lot about systems, government, politics. And so confidentiality is a must. The individualization and acceptance, again, goes back to allowing the client to be who they are, to lead the life that they want to lead, and that we truly accept, because I think we've all been there where someone did not accept a decision we made, or a choice, or a lifestyle, or anything that we came up with, and you know what it feels like not to be accepted. And so, but you also know the importance of actually being acceptance, having acceptance in your life. And then to have a non-judgmental attitude. Again, we all have our individual lives and the right to lead those lives. So you definitely want to be non-judgmental and to let people lead the life that they choose to, and also the freedom of expression. Any questions so far before we go into some of the degrees for social work that you can get? All right.
Not at this moment.
Thank you. So with the degrees in social work, you can get a bachelor's in social work, which is what I have from the San Diego State University. You can also get a master's in social work, which is what I have from California State University, Los Angeles. You can do advanced standing programs with the BSW. You can also have a concentration with either our military, aging, or forensics. Once you have your master's degree, you can apply with the Board of Behavioral Sciences to become a licensed clinical social worker, and you would start off as an associate. Once you do 3,200 hours within a 6-year time period, you will then take an exam, and once you pass, you will then be a licensed clinical social worker, which I have as well. And after you do that, you have to do continuing education every year. You can also do a doctorate of social work or get a PhD. So there's a lot of flexibility within the social work field, and the sky is really the limit to what you want to do in your educational goals and what you want to pursue. Within the careers of social work, there's a ton of them. You can work for child welfare, working with children and families, which is what I do. You can work with people who are older, with our elderly population. You can work in healthcare and do medical social work. You can work in mental health, can work in a private practice or own your own private practice. You can work as a school social worker. You can work in the substance abuse field. You can work with violence, criminal justice, victims of violence. You can work in the trauma and crisis and in disasters. And we could talk about some of that, how social workers are used. There are military social workers. We have public welfare workers. We have social workers that are in the macro practice, dealing with community organization and policy practice, management and administration. We have our rural social workers that are working in more rural populations. And then we also have international social workers. So whether you want to be here within LA, if you want to travel abroad, if you want to be out of state, there's tons of work. And as you saw, it is only increasing from now and showing the stats into 2030. Here you'll see it's an Indeed job posting for a case manager. And so it's showing that it's around $20 to $22 an hour for full-time with a bachelor's. And so you will see jobs like this that will need case managers in all of the fields that were listed in the previous slide. And here's kind of the going rate for the salary as well. And then going back to our social workers and the number of jobs. So in 2020, for social workers overall, the median salary was about $51,000 a year, averaging out to about $24.88 an hour. With this was the 750,000 jobs that we were talking about. So with that 12% increase is what you're going to see from 2020 to 2030. And the employment change that we'll see, that would be a growth of almost about 90,000 jobs. Any questions, any thoughts? Did you guys know this about social workers and how in demand social workers are?
Yeah, I had been doing a little bit of research and found that it's a very growing demand for social workers.
And typically you start looking at these things around your senior year or junior year because you want to decide what you're going to do and what your next step will be. And so Indeed and LinkedIn probably be some of your best friends. But you can definitely see that there's a range within the social work field that you definitely can be involved in and find your passion in. So social workers serve on the macro, meso, and micro levels. Within micro, there's your direct practice. So you're working with individuals in all ranges of ages. You'll be doing therapy and case management. With your meso group, you'll be working within groups and families. And in your micro, you'll be dealing with your policy, administration, and planning, some community organizing and development coalitions, and some political and social action. So within those, I would say you tend to go towards jobs that really suit you. So I know that I was never really a meso or macro practice person. I've always been very micro. I've loved working with my individuals. And so that is what really drove me in social work. But I have tried all of the rest. And so again, within any field that you choose to do, you definitely have to go to the type of work that really is a passion for you. To work 30, 40 years in a career, you definitely want to be passionate because that's a very long time to work and not love what you do. So the ways that social workers do help, if you're a student, just some ideas to throw out. If you're a student who needs athletic shoes to participate in sports, but your parents can afford them, you would talk to your school's social worker to see if they can find resources for you. If you want a better relationship with your spouse or children or parents, you could talk to a social worker and they can help you find ways to make connections with others stronger. If you're suffering from depression, anxiety, or substance use or disorder, the social worker can give you strategies and guidance to surmount the mental illness and addiction. Most therapists are social workers. You do have licensed marriage and family therapists, and you have licensed clinical social workers, and you also have licensed professional clinical counselors. So you have a few different license types, and you will see most of those are either social workers or MFT, and then some in other disciplines as well. If there are no playgrounds or healthy food choices in your community, and you want to see positive change, there are social workers that can help you organize and make your voices heard in local, state, and federal government. Or if you think a child or older adult is suffering from abuse or neglect, or you're interested in growing your family through foster care or adoption, there's social workers that are there to help with that. So these are just a few different areas where you can think of where a social worker might be involved and that can assist in some way. Are there any ways that you guys think of when you hear the job social worker? What do you think of?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
When you hear the job social worker, or you see case manager, what is the first thing that kind of comes to your mind?
Oh, for me, it's I work at an elementary school, so I think of her like the psychologist that we have at school.
Gotcha. Okay. What else do you guys think of when you hear social worker?
I think of just connecting individuals to resources.
Mm-hmm. It's a big part of the job. Yeah. Any other thoughts when you guys hear the word social worker? Good or bad? It doesn't have to always be good.
I was honestly going to say that you honestly made me change the way that I pictured social work.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know it was so broad and in many different areas, from early education through late adulthood, like you said.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people, when they hear social worker, and that's why I said you could say the good or bad, it won't hurt my feelings. Trust me. They say it's the baby snatcher. Have you guys heard that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's why I said just be honest. It's okay. You're not gonna hurt my feelings. I've been with them for 17 years. It's okay. I've heard it all, trust me. So that's why I said you might hear, or even not even that you would hear, some of you guys have had, or your family or friends have had a personal experience with a social worker, whether good or bad. And then sometimes the movies that you'll watch, you'll see social workers in the movies. So it's not that only about the things that you hear, but the things that are put out on the media as well. And so that's why I said sometimes those things could be good or bad. But again, it's about learning about the field and different fields to figure out what works best for you for a career. Any other thoughts you guys have on what social workers do? So how the core functions of case management and social workers truly function, the very top of your list is always your engagement with clients. You have to be able to engage, you have to be able to connect, and you have to be able to work with all types of people. There's not any type of person, population, culture, even as far as when we're talking about languages that I have not had to work with. So you have to be open to that. And even if that is not your strong suit, you have to make it work and you have to figure it out. So if I speak very little Spanish, I can understand, but when I need a translator, I know that I need a translator, but I'm still going to do the work that's needed to be done. So that's why I mean, you have to just kind of make it work, and you still have to serve the clients, even if there are barriers in place. You will assess the client's priorities, strengths, and challenges. You'll develop and implement a care plan. You'll be monitoring service delivery, evaluation of outcomes, and then you will also be dealing with the closure as far as termination and transition follow-up. So depending on the setting that you're working in, you will work with all 5 of these. Sometimes you just do the startup and do the care plan, and then you transfer them out. So you never really deal with the termination part of it. So depending on the setting that you're going to be in, you can work with all 5 of these or some of these, but your typical work in most settings, you will have the engagement of clients, you will be assessing your client, you will develop some type of action plan or care plan for them, you will be monitoring what they're doing, and then at completion of that, their termination. Within case management, it's a collaborative process of assessment, planning, facilitation, care coordination, evaluation, and advocacy for options and services to meet an individual or family's comprehensive health needs through communication and available resources to promote patient safety, quality of care, cost-effective outcomes. The underlying premise of case management is based on the fact that when an individual reaches the optimum level of wellness and functional capability, everyone benefits, the individual being served, their support systems, the healthcare and delivery systems, and the various reimbursement sources. So within case management, your main job as a social worker is that, like I said at the very beginning, you see people probably at their worst time. So whether you're in medical social work, whether you're at a welfare agency, you will encounter people that are having a really difficult time and need help. And so when you're going through assessments, when you're going through planning, when you're doing coordination of services, when you're doing a care plan, all of this is to help them reach their optimum level of wellness and functioning. Are any of us always at our optimum level of functioning every day? Absolutely not, myself included. Every day, we all got a little something going on. But when you're working with your patients, you really want to, your goal is to get them to that level of what their optimal level is. And that's very important too, because I said there. Sometimes we have an expectation for our clients that they should be where you feel they should be. When you go to assessing a patient and assessing your client, it's all about finding out, again, what is it that is their optimum level? Where do they want to be? What do they feel they need help with? And that is what your care plan is. So even if you feel, oh, I think they should be doing this and this and this, but they just want to do this, we're going to do what they want to do. Because again, it's their life and we're there to help them and serve them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Any questions on case management? So with your case management, you will always have the assessment. So you identify the strengths and barriers, which are stated and summarized in both objective and subjective terms. There will be an assessment as a process of a dynamic, ongoing, and changes to meet new needs and incorporate new information. And eventually there is an end to the process. You will always have clients that come in and you might start working on one thing and then all of a sudden something else happens in life and we have to reroute and start working on something else. So you have to be able to be very fluid and very flexible, because when you're dealing with human lives, just like when you deal with your own, no one day is the same, no one issue is the same, no one person is the same. And so as you're working with a process with them in a care plan, that may come where you might have to change and meet new needs. An example of that would be if you're working, let's say, with a client who is in need of a job. And so we're working on a job and this is the main focus because we need to get income and we need to have them stable and on their feet. And then they have a death in their family. there's no way for you to say, okay, so how many applications did you fill out, even though you just lost someone? We need to address the immediate need, because until you address the immediate need, we can't get back to why they originally came in. You'll also see a lot of times that clients will come in and they will say, I need housing. Like, okay. So then when you start uncovering this layer of things, it's like, well, why don't you have housing? And so you start pulling back the layers and you find out that they have mismanagement of money. They've had a loss in a job. They've had some setbacks within life. And so there becomes all these layers. So it's not just housing. We also need to address all the other layers that have caused this issue with housing. So a lot of assessment is trying to figure out the layers. A lot of times the clients will come in and they don't even know their layers, which makes things really difficult, because now you're in this kind of guessing game of trying to figure out, how do I help them and how do I serve them for what they need, and getting to the deep root of the issue. When you have development and implementation of a care plan, you establish the goals of intervention and prioritize the client's needs, as well as determine the type of services and resources that are available in order to address the established goals and desired outcomes. I mentioned too, jobs and housing, and we both know LA has none of either. So it's very hard as a social worker when someone says, I need a job. It's like, yeah, a lot of people do. Or I need housing, or I need affordable housing. Let's say that. Because there's plenty of housing in LA. You need affordable housing. So again, you're trying to find resources sometimes in a field that there's not a lot of resources, and you're really trying to figure out and try to create something for this. With the implementation of a care plan, you also have the opportunity for the client to articulate their needs, priorities of their needs, and to be present and involved in their planning. It's very important to include the client in their planning, because again, this is their life and not yours. So when you're doing the planning, what do they want to do and what do they need? And then you will monitor the service delivery. So you'll put case management plan into action. You'll evaluate the extent to which the goals are being achieved, and assure that the quality of services are provided at appropriate levels of care. Any questions so far before we go into the multidisciplinary teams that you will likely work with in the social work field? Okay, so within social workers, we will work with experts in all of their strengths. So social workers, we do not prescribe medication. Therefore, you need to work with psychiatry. Psychologists, as social workers, we do not do testing. You will need to work with your psychologist. Medical, we did not go to medical school. You need to work with your doctors. Within education, we do not do IEPs. We do not have degrees in education. You will need to work with your teachers, your superintendents, your counselors. And then with the advocates, with the actual client, the family, the perspective, you have to work with everyone in order to achieve the goal that the client wants to achieve in their life. So it's very important that you work within the team. Some of the jobs that you will see where you will work with these type of teams would be in child welfare. You have multidisciplinary teams. With the elderly population, within the medical field, within mental health, school social work, substance abuse, criminal justice, crisis and trauma, military social work, public welfare, community organizing and policy, management administration, and then rural and international social work. You will always be working with some type of multidisciplinary team within your job function. For school social workers, employment of child, family, and school social workers is projected to grow 13% from 2020 to 2030, faster than the average of all occupations. The child and family social workers will be needed to work with families to strengthen parenting skills, prevent child abuse, identify alternative homes for children who are unable to live with their biological families. In schools, most social workers will be needed as student enrollment rises. However, employment growth of child, family, and school social workers may be limited by federal, state, and local budget constraints. So we just had to see over this next decade how the employment for child, family, and school social workers is projected to grow, and how many jobs actually open up. With the start of 2020 and with the pandemic, there definitely was a decrease in jobs, and we saw a lot of that in that affected every field, not just social work. And so you're just now starting to see where there are social worker jobs and case manager jobs that are being posted again and starting back up So it will be different. It'll be difficult to see and really project what that will look like, 7 years from now, 8 years from now, by 2030. But it's definitely back on the increase. So if you want to decide if social work is for you, consider all the areas of practice and specialties. We went over a whole list. And if any of those kind of tug at your heart and you're like, I really would like to work with the military, I really like to work with kids, or I really like the elderly, or I really like medicine. If any of those are kind of tugging at you, those are the areas that you would really want to explore to decide if that is the type of job that you want to have. Do you have a strong interest in one or several of the areas? There are times where you can work with those multiple populations just dealing with one job. A lot of times when you're working with and doing therapy, mental health therapy, you can work between a school, you can work with the military, you can work with first responders, you can work with the medical field. You will touch on individuals, families, couples. And so if you want to work with a wide range, sometimes mental health therapy, you can do all of that in one single setting. And then if you just wanted to hone in on one particular area and just say, I just want to work with the military, there are tons of social work opportunities within our military and government. So you have to just decide where your interest lies and see if that's right for you. Also consider the personal characteristics that are suited to social work practice. So make sure that, being a social worker means that you're of service to the community, you're of service to the population that you're serving, and you have to make sure that you're able to handle some of the difficulties of life that other people are facing. It's not the easiest job, but I can definitely tell you it's probably one of the most rewarding. And as you get more experience in the field, it definitely gets easier day by day. I will say that. So some of the characteristics that you need in social work practice, definitely a commitment to self-awareness. You have to know yourself first. You have to be very committed to learning yourself and learning about your own trauma and your own issues before you go out to help others. To have trust in people. There's a lot of good people in this world. I know if we look at social media and we look at the news, probably don't see not one. So let's not look at that. But you do have to have trust in people. There's a lot of good out in this world and a lot of people that actually need help and want help. And a lot of people that are there to help. So that is there. You definitely have to have a positive outlook. You have to have a respect for diversity. Like I said before, no one client is the same as another. And so you have to respect each person's individual characteristics and their diversity. You have to be creative. I talked about before, sometimes there's a limited resources. You got to be creative of where you find these resources at. To have an open mind, you definitely have to have empathy and compassion. You have to have flexibility. A lot of this job, you're dealing with people. In your own life, you have a lot of things that change. And so when you work with a client, a lot of things in their life change very drastically. And so you have to be flexible to say, I had to go pick up my kid, something happened. Me too. So let's meet at 5 instead of 4. It's okay. So you just have to be flexible. You have to have curiosity to figure out what's going on with your client. Like I said, they might come in and say, I need housing. We need to dig into these layers and figure out not only do you need housing, but what's going on with your housing? Why are you not able to keep housing? So you have to have a little bit of curiosity, a little bit of investigative skills to kind of figure things out. Definitely need to have patience and healthy skepticism. All of these will definitely help you in social work case management. Within the National Association of Social Worker Values and Ethics, at the top of that is service, social justice, dignity and worth, the importance of human relationships, integrity, competence, human rights, and scientific inquiry. Any questions that you guys have so far before we get into some career and some jobs you can have? Some places you can work? Okay, so with a bachelor's, some things that you can do with children and teens would be the All People's Christian Center, Children's Bureau, Child Guidance Clinics, residential programs like 5 Acres, Hathaway, Sycamores, Vista Del Mar, DCFS. You can work at a foster family agency, at the Teen Line or Homeboy Industries. Within the School of Social Work, you can work for LAUSD or Pasadena Unified School District. These are all things that are here in this local area close to campus. Within homeless shelters and programs, there's the Skid Row Housing Trust, there's Gramercy Place, Beyond Shelter. With a Master's of Social Work, within the medical and physical health, you can work at White Memorial Medical Center. You can also work at Children's Hospital LA, Venice Family Clinic, City of Hope as a clinical social worker. Within mental health, there's the LA Department of Mental Health. They have the Kedron Acute Psychiatric Hospital and Community Mental Health Center. Within Women Resources, we have the Asian Pacific Women's Center, East LA Women's Center. Mia Casa is the domestic violence shelter. Peace Over Violence deals with domestic and family violence. You have Wings in the YMCA. You also have Women Helping Women Services and Volunteers of America. So based on the type of degree that you have, those are different examples of places that you could work that are all close by campus. Have you guys heard of any of these places?
Yes.
Yes. Which one?
So I did a Mommy and Me program with my daughter at the Children's Bureau.
Oh, good. Okay.
And then I work at LAUSD at
That's
the
right.
LAUSD, and then the White Memorial. I've heard of that hospital.
Okay, very good. Have you guys heard of any of the other places? Anyone else?
Yeah, I've heard about the Volunteers of America. I know they help homeless people.
Okay. I will say when I was in my bachelor's program, and I'll tell you how all that started, I knew nothing about social work until I didn't even know what a social worker was until my sophomore year. All this stuff, because I was in San Diego, there's different names, but they all do the same thing, knew absolutely nothing. So if you're looking at this list and you're like, what is she talking about and what is this stuff? That's okay too. Just want to let you know, you will learn very quickly, but I did not know any of this stuff until my sophomore year of college. Any of these other ones anybody else has heard of or worked at?
In the chat, someone said Homeboy Industries is awesome. There's a great organization.
Yeah.
Peace Over Violence. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, they're a great program. Love them dearly.
And just real quick, with the BA, it doesn't mean that you have to have a bachelor's in social work. You know, even a bachelor's in child development is a related degree that for a lot of these, if they require a bachelor's degree, they have jobs that require, you know, entry level, they require a bachelor's degree. They often will say something like bachelor's degree in social work or a related field, or sometimes they'll even say child development or related fields because they want people that have, you know, expertise in both of those kinds of topics.
Yeah, and I've even seen in Indeed where they'll just say social services.
Right.
So if you just say like whatever you have, it has to do with even the sociology to your psychology. There's just so many. So
right.
Yeah, you don't just have to have a bachelor's in social work. And trust me, with case management, you can work with a child development or a psychology or a sociology. You could definitely do these things here as well. And I know Dr. Dennis will get into some of the supplemental certificates, but we do have the Child Abuse and Family Violence Institute with the mission, and that is the Institute was established in 1990 under the umbrella of the School of Health and Human Services. And the main goal of the Institute was to promote effective prevention of and intervention of child abuse and domestic violence by providing interdisciplinary education, training, and the state-of-the-art resources for students, professionals in the community. And the Institute serves as a resource for the community and promotes interdisciplinary cooperation between the university and various community agencies. Sorry, it was a mouthful. And then there's also the certificate with the Applied Gerontology Institute, with the objectives being specific objectives of the program include the provision and opportunities to develop an understanding of the biological, psychological, and sociological processes of older adult maturation and aging, to address the current and future demographic trends of the aging population and implications for health and social services, program and development and service delivery, and also to learn about conceptual frameworks in providing culturally sensitive and meaningful health and social services to older adults. So those are just some of these supplemental certificates that you can obtain. Some of the volunteer activities, because you're like, I use everything we're talking about is once you have a degree. It's like, well, what do I do before then? So you can kind of learn what you want to do. There's the EPIC program, Cal State LA, the best volunteer organizations in Los Angeles. You can become a CASA worker for the CASA of Los Angeles, and also volunteering at the Violence Intervention Program. So just a few here of just some volunteer of some organizations that you can volunteer with without even having to have a degree. And that is also a good way. The volunteering is a great way actually to kind of learn what populations you like, what you like to do, what you don't like to do. It gives you just that opportunity to learn. So before I get into my career and just a brief on how my path started, any questions? Okay, so in 2021, in 2001, my parents dropped me off at San Diego State. I was a psychology major, and then statistics happened. So I went into that class. It was stats, I don't know, 1 of 3. The professor wrote some stuff on the board. I was like, I don't know, I can't do this. And then at the end of the class, he was like, well, you should know this already. So then we're going to really dive into it. I said, okay, we're done. So I went to the psychology office. I said, I'm not going to pass this class. It's like calligraphy on the board. I have no idea what he's saying. I can't do this. And they're like, well, this is the first of 3 and you have to pass all of them for the degree. And so they're like, well, you can go down to the social work hall. They only had to take 1 stat class and it's easier than ours. And the social workers are down the hall. And I was like, cool, sign me up. So that's literally how I became a social work major. Knew nothing about social worker, nothing. I didn't even know what a social worker did. I just knew they only had 1 stat class. And they told me that all the football players and the basketball players are in it. And so it's super easy. I was like, perfect, sign me up. And I promise you, that's exactly how it happened. And then I found out that the classes I had already took in psychology transferred to my social work major. I know everybody's laughing. Trust me, I promise, swear to God, that's what happened. And so it all worked out. By my senior year, we had to do an internship for a bachelor's level. And so I actually interned for the Department of Children and Family Services in San Diego. And so within that internship, this is the first time I ever knew that people took away people's kids. I've been fortunate enough in my life that I didn't have to experience any of that. And so I said, what is going on? And so I really learned about the protection of children. I learned about actually helping families and providing resources and housing, and really getting to the fundamental issues of why families end up in a government system. And so from then on, it was pretty much, I said, this is what I want to do. I just knew with that, I love the flexible schedule. I would be with my preceptor during my internship days, and we would go see clients, and then we would go grab lunch, and then we go see some work clients. And then he's like, I have to go pick up my dry cleaning. And then we go do that. And I just said, so you can just kind of like move around the day. And he's like, yeah, we do all of our work and get everything done, but you have flexibility. And I was like, I love this. I don't have to be in an office all day. I said, okay, I think this will work. So while I was also in college around my junior and senior years, I also worked in group homes for children. So that was kind of my social services and how it began while I was in college. The reason why I did not stay in San Diego is I applied at San Diego DCFS, and their cutoff period for the application was May of that year, and I graduated in June, and I didn't have the degree. And so because I didn't have the degree, my application was not valid. So I was like, I guess I'll go to grad school. So I graduated in 2005. That's my lovely grandmother there with me at graduation. And so then I started grad school at Cal State LA. I was accepted in the Title IV-E program, which is a government program that is trying to get master's level social workers into child welfare services. I didn't really understand the benefit of that when I signed up, but I'll tell you about it later. So I did the Title IV-E program. They actually paid for one of my full year of tuition. While I was in grad school, I had one of the members of my church worked at this behavioral health clinic and got me a job as a medical social worker. And she was my supervisor, even though I should have had a master's degree, but and so I worked as a medical social worker and learned that I did not like medical social work. So that's why I say, try things out. You'll see what you like. I graduated in 2007. There are a couple of my classmates there at graduation, and graduated in June and started working for DCFS 72707. So with this, I don't know if any of you guys ever applied for a government job or know of anyone that has?
No.
No. Okay. So for what I hear, because I didn't have to do it, the process is very difficult. So you do this application, you have to test, you get put on this list, you might get a call back. If you're on the list for over the year, you have to do it all over again. this is like the process to get in. So when I say I didn't understand the benefit of Title IV, I literally graduated. They called me while I happened to be in Puerto Rico with my girls that you saw there, and we were on our vacation trip from graduation. They say, you start July 27th. So no tests, no nothing, literally got a government job with full benefits and a pension, and didn't know what I signed up for, but I'm glad that I did. While at DCFS, when I first started, I did continuing services. So those are your social workers that you'll typically see that go out once a month. They will see kids, they will do the case management part of the case. So I did that for the first 3 years. Then in 2010, I transitioned to dependency investigations. And so I worked with our actual child dependency court in developing the petitions that are against the parents or the adults that have in some way have abused the children. So I worked hand in hand with all the attorneys, judges, as far as dealing with the WIC code. So these are all the laws that go into dependency court, and did that for 3 years. After that, I moved around, moved to supervisor. So I supervised continuing services and dependency investigators for another 3 years, and then moved into administration. So my current role is as a contract administration. So all of our group homes and our foster family homes are held by a contract. And so I make sure that they are following our contract through the county. And so that is my job there. Since I've graduated with my master's, I became a licensed clinical social worker in 2010, and then a licensed professional clinical counselor in 2013. Have any of you guys heard of a licensed professional clinical counselor?
I've heard about the degree, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or about licensing, I'm sorry.
The licensing, yeah. So that is actually new to California. I was grandfathered in. It makes me feel a little old, but I was grandfathered in. LPCC came to California in 2013, and they opened it up to anyone that was already a LCSW or MFT to become an LPCC. So I did it. I don't know why I need it, but I didn't want to not get it, and they were willing to grandfather me in. So I just did it. But what you'll see is like your professions that like your master's of psychology or any other master's degree that's not an MFT or MSW, they can get a LPCC and then can also provide therapy. So it's that licensing that kind of bridges that gap. And that's what you'll see. Then in 2014, I started teaching, and my first school that I taught at was Cal State LA in the social work department. When it came right back home. So I've taught in the social work departments, psychology, early childhood education, and child development departments for Cal State LA, CSUN, Mount St. Mary's, Dominguez, Sacramento State, Santa Clara University, and Pacific Oaks. So that's kind of in my teaching. So it's going on, we're at 9 years, goodness. In 2013, I started supervising clinical hours for LCSWs and LPCCs. In 2015, I was asked by the Board of Behavioral Sciences to become a subject matter expert. So I actually I fly up to Sacramento. I work on both exams, either LCSW or LPCC, in developing the questions, making sure that the questions that we have, that they're not too hard, not too easy. So we do a lot of stats, and this is why I needed that stat class. That should pay attention. So we do all of that in these work groups. So I do that a few times a year. I became a field instructor for MSW students in 2016. In 2018, I started doing critical stress management. So if there's like a terrorist attack or I'm trying to think of like, oh, do you guys remember the Las Vegas shooting when the man shot at an MGM and shot into the crowd? So they will fly therapists on site, and you will do therapy, crisis therapy on site. And so I've been working with them for a couple of years too. So if something happens to happen, the last call that I got was the shooting of the school in Texas, but a majority of those families and students were Spanish speaking. And so they wanted Spanish speaking therapists. So, but those are just issues of things that might happen in our world where you'll be literally flown out on site to provide therapy. And then last but not least, in 2020, I started a private practice and it has grown. We now have 8 therapists that work for the agency and provide mental health therapy for individuals, couples, and families. So that has been my career over the last 20 years. That is my life. So there's a lot, and just to show you guys this, it's a lot that you can do with a social work degree. I never really wanted to be stuck behind a desk. I knew I wanted to be do therapy, but not that much. So now I see about 5 patients a week. I always wanted to teach, and so I was able to come back home to Cal State LA and teach, and just be able to have my hand in a few different pots. And that also makes the work a little bit easier too, because I never get bored, as you can see. So it's hard to get bored when you're doing stuff and then doing stuff that you love. So that is all I have for you guys. Do you have any questions for me?
I had a quick question.
Yes.
Do they still allow you to do that if you get your LCSW to do LPCC as well?
So what they're doing now, if you're not grandfathered in, you have to do 3,200 hours for them as well, and a test for them and everything. So we got grandfathered and didn't have to do all of that. We just had to take the initial licensing exam. But now for that license, you have to do all of the requirements.
Oh, okay, got it.
Well, thank you so much,
Of
Professor
course.
Whaley. It's it's such wonderful information and covered very clearly. So I really appreciate it. And then hearing your experiences as well, and your career trajectory is really helpful, because students can kind of see all the amazing things you can do over the course of 20 years. But
Right.
that there's a lot more to it. You're not just doing one thing, that you can also teach, and you can also have private practice, and there's just so many things that you can do with a social work degree. So thank you so much for joining.
Of course, you're
us.
very welcome anytime. It was nice seeing you all.
Thank
So
you.
now we're going to be switching to really quickly. I just wanted to add my part, which is just a tiny bit about what can you do to prepare as child development students. You can of course, we have a lot of undergraduate courses. You can start taking these courses, even though you may not be a social work major. You can take some social work classes as your advanced topic electives. And certainly lots of our child development classes are related to issues of social work. So whether it's the family resource and case management, or the issues in child abuse and interpersonal violence, a lot of these. And, if you want to go to a master's in social work, your bachelor's degree in child development is a related field. You usually don't have any prerequisites when you go to the master's in social work program. Although I have been told that it's recommended that you do either EDFN 3520 or HHS 4000. So even though, Professor Whaley didn't have to do a lot of statistics, and you don't have to do a lot of statistics with social work, but they do want you to have one more advanced statistics course beyond just what you did, for your quantitative reasoning. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then, as we said, the child maltreatment and family violence is definitely a certificate that you can do with your child development degree. You can add this on and get this certificate. If you're interested in that, you should contact Dr. DeLevy. This is just a little bit of information about the Masters in Social Work at Cal State LA. They have both a 2-year and 3-year program that people with child development degrees can do. And so these are just some information about it and the link to it. Check it out. Their applications are going to be due soon. So you would want to if you are graduating this year and you would want to start the program in the fall of 2023, then you need to be looking into applying soon, because their applications are going to be due in, I think, January or something like that. So if you have any questions, you can contact me, or you can contact Michelle Lightburn if you specifically have questions about the MSW admissions. And they do some information sessions about MSW. So now we are going to be moving to our discussion portion, where we have one of our alumni, or one of our alums here, who is going to talk more about her career pathway in social work. And so if I can introduce Charlene Gaspar, are you here, Charlene? Unmute.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm here.
Hi, how are you doing tonight?
Jen. Good, thank you. How about yourself?
Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So we have some questions for you. If you can start out by just, at least introducing yourself and what program, what bachelor's degree, or what program you and what was the year that you graduated. So just start with that. We'll be getting into more issues in just a second.
I'm sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Charlene, and like Professor Dennis said, I am a CASA alum. I graduated in 2019, and I majored in child development. And then I actually I started to do the domestic violence and child abuse prevention certificate. But because of, some personal reasons, I wasn't able to finish the classes. I graduated in 2019. I took a year off to work and get some experience in the field, but I knew I wanted to do social work. And so then I started the graduate program in social work at USC in 2021, excuse me.
And are you currently in that program?
No, so I just graduated this last summer and I am in the field working now. I've been working with in public child welfare with DCFS for a couple months now.
Well, we're going to get to that in just a second.
I'm
So
sure.
first, tell us a little bit about your pathway to getting into the current role. Again, so you have a bachelor's degree in child development. You said you took a year off, then you started the master's in social work at USC. Can you tell us a little bit more about the program at USC and what that was like, and then how did that lead to where you are now?
Of course. So funny enough, Professor Whaley, I took her for a law class at Cal State LA, and she's the one who told me about the Title 4 or 5 stipend program. And so I was going into social work and I wanted to go to USC. We all know USC is very expensive. So I knew I needed some financial help with that. And I went into that knowing that I was going to apply for the stipend program. I applied, I got in, and they helped me pay my tuition at USC. They give you money for school and then you have to sign up. Typically it's 2 years to work for the county post-graduation. But because of the pandemic, they cut it back to 1 year. And then you also get half the money. And post-graduation, I just started working with them until I fulfill my 1 year contract. And then we can decide whether we want to keep working with the county or we can move on from there.
And how competitive was it to get the stipend? Was that something that, they only, that you have to have like a high GPA or anything like that? Or is it, are a lot of people able to get that?
Right. So it is a little competitive. There's an essay you have to write. I think there's a minimum GPA requirement that you have to have, but it's nothing crazy. It's completely doable. I want to say it's 2.5 or 2.7, but please don't quote me on that. I just want to reiterate that it's possible. You then, if your application is accepted, you get a phone call, then you do a phone interview. Then we had a Zoom interview, and then they give you a schedule of all the orientations, all the trainings. If it goes well with your schedule and you accept, then you can accept the position. And there is a whole contract that you have to sign. Okay,
so now we want to hear more about your role at your current organization, which sounds like is the county. Is it the county of Los Angeles or?
Yes, so it is LA County. Part of that contract with the stipend program is that for the second year of your graduate program, your internship has to be with public child welfare in the county that you're going to work in. So I interned in South Central for a public child welfare office there. And then for my job now, I was placed in West LA. So that's where I currently am.
And what kinds of things does it's public child welfare, what kind of things do they do? What kind of services and other?
Right. So I think Professor Whaley kind of talked on it a little bit, and she pretty much hit it on the head. We go out, we do home visits, we talk to families regarding child abuse, right? Child abuse, neglect, all the emotional abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, sexual abuse. We basically ensure children are safe. If that means that all a family needs to keep their child safe is financial assistance or housing or certain resources, whatever they may be, we try to set them up with that stuff. Our number one priority is keeping the family together. So we do everything we can to keep the family together. If children are in danger, if there are lives at stake, then unfortunately there are times that we have to remove the child due to their own safety. I do want to say that the majority of the things that you deal with in public child welfare is either domestic violence, mental health issues, or substance use.
I see. And so what exactly is your role, and how, how has it changed from when you were still in the MSW program to maybe, now that you finished it?
So my role specifically, I'm in continuing services, which is what Professor Whaley said she did for 3 years. I go out to the homes and I consistently work with the families over time until they reach their goal of child safety. The day changes day to day. It really does. One day your cases can be stable. The next, there's a crisis. So if there's a crisis, you have to tend to it. That changes your whole day. You have to reschedule with other clients. So it really depends on the day. CS, continuing services, is a little more stable. There is another side of social work that is called emergency response, and they're the ones who go out and assess if the child needs to be removed or not. But there is just they're a one-time touch and go. So they go, assess, decide, and then never see the family again. And if they stay with the department, then they come over to me. We're in continuing services.
And so it sounds like you will see sort of the same families multiple times, or so you do you have a large caseload?
Yeah, so because I just started, I'm in training. And so I'm only secondary on a couple of cases. I want to say like less than 5. Over the course of the month, the county, what they try to do, because they're trying to work on their employee, their retention rate. So making sure that there isn't a high turnover rate. They kind of wean you into the high caseload. So in December, I will be at a total of, I think, like 10 children on my caseload. Then the next month, they'll add another 5. Then the following month, another 5. But right now, I'm a little baby in the county. So I don't have many cases. But I will. There is a high caseload. The county is kind of known for having a high caseload.
Well, it's good to hear that they kind of ease you into it slowly. I mean, we wouldn't want to hear that you just are, thrust into having to handle a lot of families at once. So tell us a little bit about this training that you've received. So, do you shadow people? Do you have someone that you get to work with, or do you ever have to go by yourself?
Yeah, so right now, a lot of trainings are virtual, but they're live. They're in person, they're interactive. You have to do vignettes, watch videos, you have to fill out forms. The thing with the counties, there's a lot of documentation, right? There's kind of this thing they say, if you didn't document it, it never happens. Document everything. So there's a lot of training revolving around documentation. A couple of days out of the month, I do have to go into the office, and that mostly consists of shadowing. Shadowing workers who are well seasoned. They know what they're doing. They kind of lead you, they guide you, and you visit the families that you are put as secondary on.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see, did I have on here, what I wanted to, before we get to classes and hearing more about, the training at USC, what is a typical day like for you? To when, like, if there is a typical day, or, what is a typical day, would you say, like?
So what I'll say is right now, as like a beginner kind of the county, is you wake up, you log on, you do your trainings all day, right? 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. It's just constantly on the computer. On office days, I go in, be in the office by 8:30, log on, check emails, because your inbox is always going to be full. Someone always needs something. So you check your email, you tend to that for about an hour. And then you see what home visits you have to do for the day. Typically, we like to do home visits at the beginning of the month because most visits are once a month. And it's important to do them at the beginning of the month so that you're not scattering at the end of the month to complete them all. Because if you don't do your visits, you get in trouble. So it's important to do those. You go into families' homes, you assess, you talk to the children in private, see how they're doing, then you talk to the parents, then you talk to the family as a whole, see if there are any needs, any concerns, you address those. You talk about what's working well for the family. Also, try to incorporate a little bit of their strengths. We always try to take a strength-based perspective on working with families. So then you do that for each family, you go home, and then, you go to the office, depending on what they said, what they need, you take it from there. And sometimes you'll be off at 4, sometimes you'll get off at 11 p.m. It really depends. There was one time where there was a child who had a crisis and her placement needed to be moved. And that required driving a total of 7 hours in one day. And it was during rush hour. And I ended up getting home around 9:30 p.m. So, and that was just driving, right? But that's what the child needed in that moment. So that's what we're going to be for them. And that's what we're going to do.
Right. And that's not even the documentation. Then there's also what you have to write your reports, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But we say that for the next day because 9:30 p.m. is already really late.
I see. So tell us a little bit about the classes that you took, in the master's program. How do they compare to, your bachelor's degree classes, being about in the child development department at Cal State LA? And then did they prepare you for the classes or the program in general for the master's in social work? So tell us a little bit about, your undergrad compared to your graduate.
Right. So child development, honestly, I say was a great undergrad choice. It's a great major to major in if you're going to go into social work for grad school. I think it really does prepare you. It talks about the family as well, especially if you do want to work with children when you go into social work, or as a family as a whole. And as we know, families come in all shapes and sizes. So I think child development is a great major if you want to go into social work for graduate school. A lot of the classes I remember taking in child development, and I'm sure all of you know, it's about the family, the social environment, the child, things like that. And then with graduate school, it was more general. It was human behavior. I took a couple classes on policy and advocacy. There was a couple of research classes, I think 1 or 2 research classes. Classes about culture and diversity, and then macro work and policy. So it does kind of prepare you for it's more general. I think it's a more broad.
And did you have to do any prerequisites or anything like that as a child development major going into a master's in social work, or you could get right started with the master's classes?
I got straight to it. No prerequisites, straight to it. I think for some schools, the way Professor Whaley mentioned, there are some prerequisites for that stats class. I know USC is a little different because we also don't have to do a thesis or a final senior project. And I know other schools do. And same with the prerequisite classes and the stat classes. But other than that, no prerequisites. The only thing is that you had to major in a related field, and child development is more than related. I think they work hand in hand.
Great. And did you look into going to Cal State LA, or what made you choose USC over Cal State LA?
Yeah, so those are the 2 schools that I was torn between, because that Cal State LA, that's my alma mater, that's where I wanted to go. And then I got accepted into USC, and you hear about USC's networking, the prestige that comes attached to it. And so I feel like I had 2 really serious decisions to consider. And then I got into both, right? And then USC offered me money, basically, to pay for tuition. I had to ask. You have to ask. If that's one thing I tell people to apply to graduate schools, always ask if they can pay for classes. It never hurts to ask. If they don't offer it, ask. And who knows, they might offer you some. So I found the right person. I told them my situation. I said I was decided to go USC, but unfortunately, due to my financial circumstances, this just wasn't in the stars for me. And they offered me, I think it was like 30 grand or something. And I was like, you know what, I'll take it. Let's do it then.
And then you got the stipend program also.
Correct.
So that helped a lot. Excellent.
Exactly. So between those 2 things, I was pretty much debt free. There was a little bit of a debt because USC is ridiculously expensive, but it just seemed like such a low price for attending that school. So essentially, that's kind of led me to my decision.
Great. And if this, does the stipend program, would it also work for Cal State LA? Would they pay for wherever, or is that specifically with USC?
No, it works for Cal State LA too. It does. I am like 90% sure it's all Cal State.
Okay.
All Cal State, USC, UCLA, and I don't know about the other UCs, but USC and UCLA for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So really good to know that they
Yes.
are interested in working for the county. All right, well, so how do you feel that, you know, your experiences both as an undergraduate and then some of the things that you did in the graduate program have prepared you for this career?
I'm sorry, you said some things in the
Well,
graduate
yeah.
program that have prepared me.
Either, yeah, what experiences do you think prepared you for your role or your career path? And I get it could be undergraduate, it could be graduate, it could be things that actually you did in high school or before. You know, what experiences helped prepare you?
Interning, I think, helped a lot, actual hands-on experience, because wanting to get out in the field and, you know, wanting to help people and be in social services, the idea of it is very different from the application of it. There's a lot of patience required. Your advocacy skills really have to be refined. Learning to read between the lines, and then also a lot of creative solutions. You have to, these are all skills that are like really important. And I think interning and volunteering all help me develop those. So even at Cal State LA, I did an internship with Dr. Munger. It was bringing oral health care to the community. So it was very community-based services. And that really gave me hands-on experience working in the community. We'd go to parks, we'd go to WIC centers, talking one-on-one with people that are different from us, you know? Sometimes we don't have the opportunity to interact with people outside of our world, you know, people who are different from us. And so if that's something that you haven't done, I highly encourage you to kind of get experience in, because that will go a long way. Because social work is all about diversity. It's all about cultural differences, acceptance. And so doing that, I think, is really, really important.
Excellent, thank you. Let's see. So what would you say are, you know, some of the good things about your job, and then what are some of the challenges?
So pros, I like to start with the positive. So let's do the pros first. The pros, it's really rewarding. You know, at the end of the day, I know people think, you know, either baby snatchers, or I've had families that told me like, oh, I know you guys work on commission. So for each child you take away from the home, you get extra money. And it might be that some people think this, you know, but that's just not the case. That's not the fact. At the end of the day, I think when I'm out in the field, when I first started going out in the field, I learned that the work that social workers do in public child welfare is really important, because children's lives are literally being saved. There are cases and situations where children are being severely neglected, right? And we're talking about infants, and they're being severely abused. And so knowing that we play a role in literally saving children's lives, like literally they would be dead if we weren't there, I think is so rewarding. It's really rewarding, and it's a much needed job. I think that's the pros. The pros, that's one of the big ones. The other one is you work with the county. The county has great pay and health benefits. A lot of people don't like to say that, but I think it's important, right? Because in social work, we need to make sure that we are getting paid fairly as well. Pay and health benefits are really good with the county, retirement plans, all of that. That's a huge pro. Let's see what else. The way Professor Whaley said, you work collaboratively with a lot of people. So you learn to work with all kinds of people, and you kind of get like a sneak peek into their field. And so you can kind of put that on the back burner. Maybe it's something you want to work in later in the future, you know? Some of the challenges, the bureaucracy, I would say, of the county, that's a big one. The bureaucracy, the policy that you have to always keep in mind. You always have to work within the bounds of bureaucracy when you want to work with families and help families. Sometimes you know what the family needs, but policy won't allow it. So you have to find a way around that. That's one of the main challenges. Deadlines, you have deadlines with court, you have deadlines with your supervisor, you have deadlines with administrators. There's a lot of deadlines. And then long hours and excessive paperwork is a challenge. It's not a deal breaker, right? It's not a deal breaker for me, but it is a challenge.
As far as, saying that working for the county, it's great to hear that you feel that it's on the pro side. Do you feel that, do a lot of people stay with the county for a long time because of, the benefits and the retirement? Is it, do you see a lot of people getting burnt out, or do you see people that seem to be, to just, really want to stay because it's something that they feel is important and is a good job for them?
Right. So I think it's a mix of both, honestly, but I had a coworker say that if you stay with the county for more than 3 years, then you're going to be a lifer. If you make it to the 3-year mark, you're going to be a lifer. So I feel like at my place, at where I'm placed, the office that I'm placed, I meet either people who have been there for 2 years, or I've met people who have been there for like 10, 15 years. So there's just a mix of both. I think it's just a matter of doing the job and seeing if it's for you. And there's nothing wrong if it's not for you, right? Like, it's just a matter if it fits well with what your goals are, what you like, what you don't like. So it's a blend, honestly.
Excellent. And as we saw from, Professor Whaley, there are other things that you can do with the degree. So, you can find the right setting for you if it doesn't end up being the right one for you. And working with the families, do you feel like, is that a good part, or, can that be a difficult or struggle?
Yeah, no, I mean, it can be challenging, like, honestly, it can be challenging because we're one of the few social workers that when we show up, people don't want us there, right? It's like, oh God, what are you doing here? Like, oh, I'm in trouble, or, oh, this lady's trying to take my baby away, kind of thing. So it can be really challenging, building rapport with families, right? Making sure that they know that we're here to help in any way we can, and that our goal isn't to separate families. So it can be challenging at times. But I find that the families that are the most challenging to work with, eventually you gain their trust, and then you have the best relationship with them. Because it was so tough to gain their trust. When you finally do gain their trust, they're just willing to work with you, right? Like, they just, and it's great. There's pros and cons to working with families. There's challenges, but there's a lot of pros too.
That's really good to hear. So let's see. So what advice do you have for current students? Especially, I think most of the people in here are child development majors. What advice do you have for child development majors, especially about how to get to where you are in social work?
Go to graduate school for social work. It's the best, honestly, it's the best decision. I personally love social work because, as it was said earlier, it's really broad. If you don't like one thing, you can change it to another. And it's just, there's a lot of room for growth too. There's so many different careers. I feel like social work is one of the few things that is never going to really go out of business. Even in times of crisis, I find that they're hiring social workers instead of laying them off. For example, the pandemic, right? There was a lot of, they hired student social workers to do crisis intervention because of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So back to the advice for current students, do things related to social work to see if it is for you. I saw when I logged in that Professor Whaley was on LinkedIn. That's one of the best things you can do, is go on LinkedIn, look up social work jobs, see if the requirements, if something that you feel you can do, check out the compensation, the benefits, the requirements, what your job duties will consist of, and see if it's something for you. And don't do it for just one thing. Look up several positions, right? And if you find several that you're interested in, that you think you would seriously like to work in, I think that's a good sign. Yeah.
Now, as far as the clinical, the licensing part, now to work in the county, do you need to have licensing, or is that something that you have you gotten to the licensing portion yet?
Right. So to work for the county, you don't need to be licensed at all. They do help you with licensing because post-graduation, you have to complete 3,000 hours of supervision hours. Hours doing social work, but you have to have supervision with a licensed social worker. But working for the county is not a requirement. They do have LCSWs at the county, and they do offer supervision. And so the county is willing to sign off on those hours for their workers, even though you don't need to be licensed to work there. You can start the application process immediately after graduation. So I graduated, I filled out the application, and then you have to mail it in. It's a really tedious process. If you write one wrong number in the wrong line, you have to do it all over again. And the waiting period, I think, is like 4 to 6 weeks. And then you have to start your hours, which is 3,000 hours, which I think totals out to like about 2 years. And then you can apply for licensing after you take the ethics exam.
I see. And so is that something that you do plan to do?
Yes, I am still in the waiting process of the application.
And is there a benefit once you're licensed? Do you get paid more or anything like that? You have more flexibility in the kinds of positions you can do?
Correct. So with the county, that's the thing. There isn't just like a continuing services social worker. You can also work in adoptions. You can do therapy for clients. You can be an administrator. There's a lot of positions. You can do, I think Professor Willie says she does contracts for group homes. You can do that as well. So when you get your license, there's more room for growth. And also you can ask for a pay increase because you have your license, and it opens up the door to other job opportunities. So let's say you're unhappy at the county, so you can get so many other jobs like open up because you have your license.